Hello, my quilting friends. My name is Leah Day, and today I am quilting with Paper Quilting Stencils, and I am trying this out on my long arm. So when I originally came out with this product, I was really thinking it was going to be a push quilting, home sewing machine thing, something to help guide you when quilting, so that way you could see a line and be able to quilt faster on your home sewing machine or set down long arm. Now, I got a lot of questions about this. Can they be used on our unique long arms on a frame? Can they be useful for frame quilting? So I'm going to place my stencil on my quilt. I am off the edge a little bit, but that's just fine. Overlapping that edge is really easy with these paper stencils. So I just pull up my bobbin thread, bring that to the surface. And you want to just take 3 stitches, not really in place, but just kind of slightly moving the machine. So that way it doesn't build up thread on the back, but that locks your stitches in place. And then if this was a first row across a real quilt, then I would be lining this up with a seam line, something straight on the quilt. So now we're going to get started, and I just hold the stencil in place with my non-dominant hand. So I'm left-handed, so I operate the machine with my left hand. I steer it, and then I'm just holding the stencil down with my right hand, but I could tape this down. I'm also putting a little bit of pressure here with my hand just to give me a little bit more control. Now, as for my stitches, my settings on my machine, I am in stitch regulated precise. That means that when I stop, the machine stops. So let's say I needed to wiggle this around or do something like that, then my movement is reflected in the needle movement. It's not bouncing up and down. You could try stitch regulated cruise and see if that works better for you. Just play with that. But the biggest, most important key is that your stitch length is nice and small, and I have mine set to 16 stitches per inch. Now you'll notice I am not really staying on the line all that well. I think that that's not really the point. Our point is to have that guideline and to more or less follow it, but it doesn't have to be exact. It's just a guideline. And once you rip the paper away, no one's going to know that you didn't stitch it absolutely perfectly. It was just an idea of how we quilt the design on this scale, and I think it's really working fine. So when I get to the end, just like with a home sewing machine, we stop and we want our needle to end in the down position. So I'm going to stop it with the down, hit my down button, and then line up my next stencil, just butting that up so that I can flow right into it. So I hit my start button and I keep on stitching. So yeah, I think this is going to work great. The only downside is that you do have to rip the paper away. That's really the only downside. But with 16 stitches per inch, it's actually going to already be ripping away a little bit, I found. You can see right here, it's already wanting to tear away from the stitches. Those are really, really tiny stitches. And that's going to be really easy to pull. Once I get this off the machine, give it a little massage in one direction, little massage in the other direction, and it'll pull away just fine. Now you might be wondering, when you get to the edge of your quilt, are you going to keep on quilting? And the answer is no. Just stop, needle in the down position, and then fold your stencil over so you can see the edge of your quilt. Grab a pair of scissors and just cut that. Careful not to cut your quilt. Cut just the paper away, and we'll just quilt right up to that edge. So if you want to, you can stitch, you're going to cut off the design, so you can travel stitching, come up and stitch all of it, or you can not, just ignore that part. It's totally up to you. So I just come all the way through, and then I could travel stitch up and then get that little loop-de-loop there or not. It's entirely up to you. You can see just how easy that paper is going to tear away super, super fast. And look at those stitches. That looks great. Yeah, there's no reason why this won't work on a long arm on a frame. It's going to give you that pattern to follow, that design to follow, and you're going to be able to see where to go and stitch on a nice big soft scale. Now, if you notice that you pull on your stitches a little bit, don't worry, that will soften back out in the wash. Your stitches had nice balanced tension to start with. Even if you pull on them a little bit, once you wash it, I think that will balance out just fine. Now you might be wondering how to tie off and bury your thread tails. You can see I broke thread right in the middle of a quilting stencil, and this is a little tricky. So carefully pull back the paper just in that one section, and then I'm pulling my stitches out one at a time. I'm tugging on that top thread and then picking out with the tip of my needle to get that bobbin thread to loosen up. There we go. And then I'm going to pick back until I have long enough thread tails I can tie off and bury. I might keep going a little bit here. So that looks good. And I just tie an overhand knot, make a loop, pass the thread tails through the loop. This is really short, and I'm really not aiming to be like a hiding thread tutorial here. So if this does not if that's not clear to you, please watch my other tutorial on hiding, tying off and burying your thread tails. Okay, so now I'm going to take a cheater needle. This is a self-threading needle, has a groove in the top so I can easily pop the thread tails in. And so I run that needle into the middle layer of the quilt, into the batting area, and then I just pull it through. So that is where my stitching stopped. So I need to know that that is that location, so that way I can bring my needle over and drop my needle down in that exact spot. Bring it up, pull on my, if you drop your needle down, bring it up, tug on your top thread, you're going to bring your bobbin thread up to the surface. And just generally, I always kind of tug on my bobbin thread, make sure that it's spinning nicely. If it feels stuck, it should not feel stuck. So that's always a sign that something might be off. Maybe the thread has gotten wound around the bobbin the wrong way, something like that. So always check. It's just a good idea. All right, I'm going to needle up, just going to lift the foot ever so slightly so I can tuck that paper back down. And then now I'm going to just try and stitch right back along that and get back to my design. So that worked out just fine. And I'll finish up my design real quick and we'll rip the paper away and see how that break ended up looking. I think it's going to look fine. If you have to, you can rip all of the paper away, break your thread, then cut another piece of paper to fill in that gap. The nice thing about this is you have one design per PDF download. You can print it an unlimited number of times, so you can always just print yourself another stencil, pop it on your quilt, and no big deal. It's very, very easy to do. Now, one thing you'll notice with these wandering clover is I never really stitch them consistently, and I was asked about that, hey, is there a right way to do this? I would say not the way I just did it, which is just fine. I aim for like the figure 8 around those petals. Every once in a while, especially when I'm talking and quilting at the same time, I completely forget what I'm doing and I end up making a little bit of a mess. But in the grand scheme of things, if that was your quilt, you probably wouldn't really pay any attention to that slightly demented wandering clover. All right, let's go back over here and pull this paper away just so we can see it. And you can see that worked out fine. So that is how you're going to tie off and deal with thread breaks if you're using paper quilting stencils. Now, I will be perfectly honest, when I was first planning these, I really designed them for push quilting, pushing the quilt over a sewing table, pushing the quilt under the needle, whether you're using a home sewing machine or a sit-down long arm. That's really what I had in mind whenever I was creating these. But that's not really a reason to say that they can't work on a long arm. They definitely can. The only downside is you're going to have to tear the paper away, and that takes more time. And on a long arm, on a frame, the advantage is you can quilt with pantographs. And that's an entirely different quilting style where you have the design printed, taped together so it's all one long row, and then you follow the design using a laser light, and you have rear handles on the back of your machine so that you can follow it. Now, unfortunately, our rear handlebars have gotten pretty expensive, and adding that to a long arm has become a little cost prohibitive. So I'm looking at all different options, and I think that this is great. It definitely works quilting from the front. The only downside is you have to tear the paper away. But the nice thing is these butt together, the rows just stack, so it really is a faster and easier process when it comes to the advancing process, which can get a little complicated when it comes to pantographs. So I think that this is going to work great, and I really encourage you to give it a try. You can find my paper quilting stencils at leahday.com/paper stencil. Definitely give it a go, print it out, stitch a row across your frame. Let me know what you think, and I'd love to see a picture of your quilting with these paper stencils. So come and check them out, leahday.com/paper stencil. Until next time, let's go quilt.